Dipty's with us as well. Dipty, of course, the paper's just really full, aren't they, of this North Korea situation and the US after that missile was fired by Pyongyang.
That's right. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has called the intercontinental ballistic missile a, quote, July 4th gift to the U.S. The South China Morning Post reports in this article that the U.S. and South Korea have now retaliated with a volley of missiles into the waters along the eastern coastline. The Pentagon spokesperson says that while the U.S. is prepared to defend itself, it does remain committed, above all, to the peaceful nuclear disarmament of the Korean peninsula.
And the missile crisis, the topic of some of today's editorials as well.
Well, mainly because a lot of the papers today are saying sanctions alone will not solve this crisis, and this is something that Donald Trump needs to realize fast. The New York Times urges Trump to engage in direct dialogue with North Korea, something, I quote, that's anathema to Trump. The U.S. president has so far been relying on China to sort of sort the situation out and force North Korea to abandon its nuclear program. But this hasn't worked because China has its own reasons for keeping its distance. Tough sanctions could destabilize Pyongyang, leading to chaos and an influx of refugees into China. Now, during his campaign, Donald Trump did say he wouldn't mind sitting down and having hamburgers with Kim Jong-un. Well, now is the time, The Guardian says, for burgers, not bombs. I quote, the latest missile launch should remind the U.S. that it cannot wait for North Korea to eat humble pie, nor expect China to take Kim Jong-un's lunch away. Trump may want to strong-arm China into taking a stance by, for instance, selling arms to Taiwan, China's sworn enemy. But the priority now is to stem the escalation of tensions. And the only way to do that is through bilateral talks, however undesirable that may be.
Yeah, great headline in The Guardian there. Let's move on to Japan now. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, his party, suffered a huge loss in local elections. Could perhaps threaten his mandate here?
Well, at least according to some of the Japanese papers, I think we're still far away from that. But Shinzo Abe's Liberal Democratic Party fell to a record low number of seats this week in local elections in Tokyo. And yet his strategy, according to the Asahi Shimbun, a left-leaning daily, has been to avoid all responsibility. Even though he has apologized for the defeat, he's refusing so far to take responsibility for this defeat. Now, that party was defeated by a novice political party and its leader, Yuriko Koike, who is possibly eyeing the prime ministership herself, and in what's a chilling glimpse of how vulnerable Abe is if the opposition force united against him. He's been plagued, for instance, by nepotism scandals, and he's also been accused of arrogance and authoritarianism. But in particular, the Japanese electors are unhappy about Abe's desire to revise the constitution and give more place to the military. As you see in a cartoon from the China Daily, Abe is essentially redrawing the constitution with the brushstrokes of militarism, bearing in mind that Japan's constitution has been pacifist since the end of the Second World War.
Let's go to the European Parliament now. Specifically, though, this is a spectacular outburst from Jean-Claude Juncker, the EU Commission chief.
The British tabloid The Sun reports that Jean-Claude Juncker called the EU Parliament ridiculous yesterday, aiming his criticism at the MEPs who didn't turn up to hear him and the Maltese Prime Minister speak at a session. Juncker rebuked the MEPs for skipping the session, saying if it had been Angela Merkel or Emmanuel Macron, then more people would definitely have turned up. His outburst, though, prompted indignation from Antonio Tajani, the European Parliament chief. And what ensued was a lot of finger pointing, finger wagging, a lot of switching in between Italian, English and French, as Tajani told Juncker that he had no right to call the Parliament ridiculous. He then pulled out the ego card, telling Juncker that the EU Parliament controls the EU Commission, which is certainly not going to help the situation. But it's a sign, indeed, that months of Brexit tensions and fears over right-wing populism has put a strain on the EU's main institutions.
OK, well, that's EU tensions. Now we've got some sock diplomacy for you. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he's on a state visit to Ireland right now, meeting with the new Irish leader.
That's right. And Trudeau sort of became known for his choice of socks that is quote-unquote stylish. He likes to wear themed socks. He famously wore Star Wars-themed socks during a visit to Ireland on May the 4th. He's also worn Ramadan-themed socks and NATO-themed socks for a Brussels meeting. Well, this time, Leo Varadkar, the Irish leader, has upped the ante. The Irish Independent says Trudeau's socks were muted and lacking a bit of oomph, but the Irish leader wore socks covered in mini Mounties and maple leaves, enough to blow the socks off Justin Trudeau, no doubt.
Excellent. I wonder who thought of that idea, whether it was him or somebody else. A great idea. Thank you very much, Dipsy. Just black for me, a bit boring. Dipsy and Brian on France 24.